being recorded, and our guest is Drew Boa, and his subject is, what do I do with my sexual desire?
What do I do with my sexual desires? Does anybody here resonate with that question? You ever ask yourself that question? I've been asking myself that question for 15 years and researching and studying and talking with people and trying to get an answer that would be both spiritually mature and emotionally satisfying. An answer that could fit whether you're single or dating or engaged or married or divorced. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. What should I do with my sexual desires? And when I asked my own audience, what are some of the questions they have around this? What are the situations that they're facing? Here's what they said. One guy said, I have a lot of sexual energy, but I'm single and I have nowhere for it to go. Somebody else said, I want to enjoy sex within marriage someday, but I'm only attracted to men. Somebody else said, I want to have sex with my wife, but porn keeps coming to mind while we're in bed together. Somebody else said, I want to try sexual experiments with my wife or oral sex, but I'm not sure what's permissible. And I have specifically resonated with that one because a big part of my story is a sexual fetish, is a sexual attraction and impulse that I didn't understand, that was for something weird and specific. And so I was wondering, okay, what should I do with that, especially after I got married? It seemed like, well, we could pursue this, but would that really satisfy me? And how does this fit with God's design? Somebody else said, I have a high desire for sex, but my wife has a much lower desire for sex. Or in some cases, you might be married and not able to have intercourse at all. And that's been me too lately, because my wife has been pregnant 3 times in the last 4 years. And we have not been having a lot of sexual activity. It's just not part of my story. And when I was growing up, I got this message that I should hold my breath sexually until I get married, and then I can let it all out. First of all, which was so self-centered, and it's just not true. We are all in situations where we have to decide what to do with our desires when there's no clear direction. And that's why we're talking about this. For those of you who are on the call, I am going to be asking you some questions, and I want to give you permission to answer them publicly in the chat, or you can hit the little button that says private, and you can respond privately if you wish to remain anonymous. My question for you is, what are some of the specific attractions or desires that you have sexually? What are some of the specifics that you're dealing with? If you want to put it in the chat, you can message me privately, or if you're feeling especially brave, you can put it publicly. I want you to know that that's what we're talking about today. Whatever you put in that chat, whatever comes to mind. Maybe you're watching the recording, think of a specific attraction that you have, and you're not sure what to do with it. What is your situation right now that you're dealing with? Someone says, I'm attracted to beautiful women when I see them. Steve, it looks like you have something to say. Sorry, I can't hear Steve. For my wife to wear certain clothes while we have sex. However, I realize this is a form of control, and I've realized the need to surrender it. Right? We're going to be going in that direction and talking about what does it look like to surrender that desire. Not suppressing, not repressing that desire, and also not simply indulging it, not simply releasing it. Because here are the two options we get fed by our culture and sometimes by the church. Porn says, release your desires. Whatever desires you have, Just let them go. Let them out. Who cares? Whatever you want, you deserve it. You can have it. It's yours. And whatever you can think of, porn is available for it. There is a version of porn which can give you a version of whatever it is that you desire. So there's porn on the one hand. On the other hand, there's purity culture. And purity culture tells you the opposite: to repress your desires, shut them down, attack them, avoid them, or ignore them. Attack them, maybe with a Bible verse, even. Attack them by snapping a rubber band on your wrist. Attack them or avoid them. Run away. And in some ways, this is a valid option. The Bible tells us to flee sexual immorality. And yet there can also be a fear. And there can also be a sense of not actually dealing with the root issues, of avoiding my desires by getting all the restrictions and accountability software and not really engaging with your heart, or just ignoring the desire and acting like one person on Sunday while secretly my life is a complete mess for the rest of the week. So purity culture tells us to either attack, ignore, or avoid them, and not actually give any kind of healthy expression or healthy embrace of what God has given us with our good gift of sexuality. So porn says release, purity culture says repress. The Word of God tells us that our sexuality is good and broken, and it's under the curse of sin, and it has been redeemed by Jesus Christ, and it is being restored through our life with him. So is there a better way than porn and purity culture? Yes, there is. And that's what we're talking about today. Are you with me? I've read so much theology and so much psychology, and I've never heard somebody give me an answer to what should I do with my sexual desires that really helped me, really felt like it fit reality. And that's what I'm giving you guys today. I'm seeing one more response here that says, I'm separated from my wife and I miss her and porn is still available. So if you feel like you're in a bind, if you're in a tight spot, if you're in a difficult situation, this message is for you. Now, the first step to knowing what we should do with our sexual desires is we actually have to figure out what they are. What are those true desires? And I want to make a distinction here between the surface level and the soul level. Always, the surface level attractions and impulses that we have are connected to much deeper aches and longings that are buried within us. And in order to understand what we need to do with our desires, we have to get below the surface and get down to the depths. Here are a few just simple definitions as we get going. Sexual desire includes many categories. One is the level of attractions and cravings of, sexually speaking, I want that. Whatever that thing is, whoever that person is, I want them. That's an attraction or craving. I see someone else saying, I had same-sex attractions and haven't had much desire at all, even with my wife, who is fine with that. We do have demonstrations of affection, but it's non-sexual, and that's fine with me. Okay, so same-sex attraction is one of those attractions. Another one is an urge or an impulse, which is similar to an attraction, but it's more like I want to do that. There's an action. I want to go watch that video. I want to go masturbate. I want to go to that massage parlor. There's an urge. There's an impulse. We're still on the surface level here. So if you're wondering, what should I do with that? Well, first we got to get below the surface. Another category is fantasy. Fantasy is a little bit more developed than just a simple attraction or an urge, because there's a story attached to it. There's some kind of scenario that maybe a porn video would play out for us. And with the fantasy, it's more like, I want that thing to happen. I I want that story to be real. I want it to be my story. That's what a fantasy is. And that's where I feel like I spend much of my time learning and listening to men and getting into the specifics of what are the fantasies and the dreams that we have, even sexually. And then here's the depths. Okay, this is the level that we have to get to understand what to do with our sexual desires, our aches, and our longings and our yearnings. I have the chills even just while I'm saying that. Because this is so much richer and fuller than a simple attraction or an impulse or even a fantasy. Um, what do we ache for? What do we long for in the depths of our being? Well, whatever it is, porn is not satisfying it. In fact, it's even intensifying the ache. It might be satisfying the urge, it might be satisfying the attraction, but it's actually reinforcing the pain of that unmet longing. Um, Maybe if you're bored and porn is giving you stimulation, well, okay, but it's actually reinforcing that feeling of a void, of purposelessness, and we'll get into this. Okay, so underneath the symptoms, underneath the symptoms of our sexual experiences on the surface, there are soul level desires, and these desires come from God. These desires are good. They're holy. And so to repress them would actually be ungodly, even though just releasing them with whatever we want would also be way, 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 way less than God's design. So what are your divine desires? What do you ache for? What do you long for? What do you really want? What do you really want? The first step to knowing what to do with our sexual desires is to know your heart. To know your heart, to access the deep desire. And to help you do that, I've created a worksheet. So I'm going to share my screen here so that you guys can see my list of 40 desires. Here it is. 40 desires. I hope you guys can see this. On the left column are stories of suffering, and on the right column are divine desires. And the reason for this is because our desires are very connected to the stories of suffering in our life. I want you to focus on this right column for now. And I'm just going to read them off. And I'm also going to give you guys a link to this document so you can save it for later. What are your divine desires? Just notice whichever one resonates with you. Maybe there are 2 or 3 that resonate with you. Acceptance, adventure, affirmation, authenticity, beauty, being chosen, being desired, being known, being pursued, being noticed, belonging, care, certainty, community, connection, control, delight, escape, friendship, home, honesty, honor, inclusion, intimacy, love, nurture, peace, play, pleasure, power, protection, purpose, relief, rest, safety, significance, strength, thrill, touch, and worth. I want to stop for a moment and just ask, which of those really stood out to you? Which of those desires feels like it's at the core? And we're going to grab that link and make sure that everybody can have access to it. Putting it in the chat right now. Being pursued. For me, a big one is acceptance. And I've realized that my specific sexual fetish was really symbolizing acceptance because it was connected to a time of life and specific people that I really wanted to accept me. And I'm just going to tell you guys what it is. It's for orthodontics and braces. And it takes me back to middle school and the story of suffering when all the girls had orthodontics, and there was a very specific shape to my story where what I wanted more than anything was to kiss one of the other girls in my class. But I didn't understand that about myself. And so for the next 10 years, I had this weird fetish and I'd never understood it. And why? Why does this turn me on? Why does it appeal to me? Why is this attraction so strong? Well, it's connected to my story and this good and holy desire to be accepted. Another one for me was power and domination. It's a big part of what has aroused me in the past. And one of the specific ways that would happen is through oral sex, just because of the position of being in power. And that goes back to a story of powerlessness. And for me, feeling out of control as a kid, moving around between countries, feeling totally confined and restricted. So what are some of your desires? What are some of your divine desires? You have to get in touch with these in order for us to talk about what to do with them. And I'm gonna put the list of them in the chat here. Being noticed, totally. And by the way, for whichever one resonates with you, we can get curious about where that's coming from. And that's where the left side of that column comes in. So if you desire to be pursued, I would wonder, okay, when have you felt abandoned? Or when have you felt neglected? Like no one was pursuing you. For being noticed, okay? When have you felt invisible? When have you felt misunderstood or like no one can really see you? Another one for purpose, okay? So if you desire purpose, I'm going to wonder, okay, when have you felt a lack of purpose or a lack of direction in your life? Oftentimes these stories are from very formative years of childhood. And our sexual development and when our sexual attractions emerge is actually before puberty. Sexual development starts at birth. Some would even say it starts in the womb. Our stories are already being written. Our desires are already being formed. Another one, control. When have you felt out of control? For pleasure, when have you felt unbearable pain? This is when you can begin to get into the story. And if you're not sure, okay, what are my desires? Then let's look at this. Let's look at the other side of this column, the left side, and ask, okay, which of these stories over here resonates with you? Isolation, misery, shame, chaos, exhaustion, insignificance, weakness, a lack of touch, their rejection, boredom, criticism. The stories of suffering are unique to each of us, and they shape what we desire. Okay, are you with me right now? Are you identifying your desires? Yes? Awesome. Once we can do that, then we can say, okay, now what are we going to do with it? That's the beauty of it. Now, once you know what it is that you really want, that porn is just a pale imitation of. Then we can figure out, okay, where do I go? What do I do? Because we can bless that desire for acceptance, for control, or at least for a sense of autonomy, for pleasure, for purpose. And that's good. That's the image of God in you. And purity culture would say, oh no, shut it down. Don't even go there. Well, then we're missing out on how God created us. That desire for community, for belonging. Man, we can't live without that. And that's why purity culture has done so much harm. That's one of the reasons. There are many reasons, but it's kept us from really accessing our desires. All right, so now that you have your desires, another one is to be useful to others. Okay, yes. right? To be of help. And and every time we understand one of these, or it comes to the surface, we can ask, okay, where's that coming from? Um, and and I'm seeing a question about purity culture, which I will definitely answer later. For now, once people are getting in touch with your desires, let's talk about what to do with them, right? That's what we're here to talk about. Um, Before we do, maybe it would be helpful to just have some more examples of what this can look like, of the surface level attraction and then the deeper desire. So I once had a client who was sexually attracted to what he called naughty porn. Uh, Naughty in the sense of mischievous, breaking the rules, secret, kind of a naughty feeling to it. Okay. Well, his deeper desire underneath that was for thrill, for adventure, and for relief. It gave him a feeling of excitement, of thrill, which would make sense because he was a pastor's kid who grew up attending multiple church services by himself every weekend, bored in the back pews. And that is where he began his unwanted sexual behavior. It was unwanted because that's not what he really wanted to be doing. What he wanted was to escape, to get out of there. I mean, he was abandoned in those church pews every week. He was surrounded by women, his mother, his sisters, and all he wanted was to be with his dad, who was up there speaking, but he was so far away from everyone, and porn became his version of that. But it was only reinforcing the boredom. Another story was somebody who had the urge to sexually act out with animals. Grew up on a farm when he was a boy. Okay, what was the desire? It helped him feel intimate. It was tender. There was touch, even from the tongue of an animal. Okay, how do you make sense of that? Well, he never felt connected to another human being. He never felt safe, like he could really be with someone and be himself. So of course an animal would be safer, and he could be close. He would never get turned down. And it would be tender. So even things that we have so much shame about that maybe seem like so unacceptable, we can begin to have compassion for them when we understand the desire. And then one more. When I was in the PSAP training program, my professor talked about a young boy who used to cover himself with feces repeatedly. And you wonder why, right? And for each of us, as we think about our specific cravings and our specific urges, we wonder why. Why sometimes? Well, it makes sense once you understand that he was gang raped in prison, and that this was offering him a feeling of protection. If he covers himself with feces, then nobody will want to touch him. And you can see how that was actually really good. That was actually really important. And at one time, it served a purpose in his life. But now, it's keeping him trapped. We each have our own version of that, which we need to discover so we can validate and bless the divine desires. And then we can figure out, okay, how can I pursue? How can I pursue these desires in a healthy way? And that's what I'm daring to suggest today, that actually your desires are at the core good. Yes, they have been affected by sin, by our own sin and by the sin which has been done to us. Still good. All of the evil cannot erase that image of God which is within us. So here is my game plan for what to do with your desires. Let me see if I can pull this up. I'm going to suggest to you 4 different ways that we can pursue our desires according to God's design. Here we go. Once you can understand what that thing is, I see another comment here for escape, for acceptance and friendship. And I just want to pause on that one, escape. Some people might think, well, escape, that sounds like a bad desire. Escape is what's causing the problem. Well, it depends on what you're escaping from. Escape can be really good. For example, going on a retreat to get away from work for a while. Or if you're in a situation where you're being harmed, escaping can save your life. So actually, all these desires are good. Whatever your desires is, acceptance, friendship, community, belonging, control, pleasure. Here's what we can do with it. Number one, and this is our foundation, get it from God. And this is, maybe it's not new information for you, or maybe it is, that ultimately our hearts are restless until they find rest in Him. That He is the one who created these desires, and He is the one to whom all our desires point. The thing is, that's not enough, though, because even if you have a really strong relationship with God and you feel accepted by God, or you feel like you have pleasure in your relationship with God, or you feel a sense of purpose or being pursued by God, that's just one part. That's just one part of how He created us. Because even when Adam and Eve had perfect communion with God in the beginning, He still said it's not good for them to be alone. So that's one part of it. We need to get it from God. And find it with other people. Find a way to experience what it's like to be pursued by another person, to be accepted by another person, to have community and belonging with another person. Even if my sexual urges and attractions and fantasies are not being fulfilled in the way that they feel like they should be on the surface, when you get down to the soul level, can you get that? The thing is, that's terrifying. And other people are not always going to be safe or close enough to do that for us. Now, if we don't have that foundation in God of getting our desires met by God, then in our relationships with others, we're just going to be clingy. We're going to be feeling like I need other people. And that's actually going to tear apart the experience that we really need. If we have that foundation from God, and let's say you're going to a recovery group and opening up about your sexual story, then it feels like such a great risk, because let's say you want acceptance. You could be rejected in that place and it would hurt even more and you'd be even more wounded. But you're also opening yourself up to the possibility of healing. And so finding it with others takes a lot of courage. Takes a lot of courage. And it's also the only way out. And it's a way that we can channel our desires in a healthy way. For example, in my situation with my wife with a sexual fetish, what if instead of asking, okay, can I figure out a way to have my fantasy come true in real life? What if I got down to the soul level and said, what I really want is acceptance, or what I really want is to feel a sense of autonomy? Can I have that with her? Yes. Yes. Together we can collaborate and create an experience where I feel accepted. And she'd be happy to do that, even sexually. Or an experience where I feel like, I'm going to take a turn of maybe leading the way and having a little bit more of control here, while honoring her. There can be a dynamic there within marriage, but if you're not married and you're single, the same goes for friendship. Can I really acknowledge what it is that I need, what it is that I want to my friends or to other people, and be honest about that? It opens up the possibility of finding that desire satisfied with other people. And that's another part of it. But the deepest part, the one that I work on the most with myself and with others, and which has the most amazing transformative effect, is when you're able to give that thing to yourself. Able to accept myself. Whew. Able to feel like I belong belong with myself, able to be noticed, to have the boy within me who was rejected to be accepted, or who was dominated to be held and kept safe. If you're coming from a story of being excluded, to offer yourself that inclusion. What does that look like? Well, it involves going back into those places where you were wounded, usually with the help of a professional, and and giving yourself the thing that you needed but didn't get. That's a really good summary of what it looks like to give it to myself. Now, in lust and in porn and in sexually acting out, I'm giving this thing to myself in an unhealthy way. But I'm actually not giving myself the desire. What we think we're doing when we relapse is, I think that it's going to take me closer to my desire, but in reality, it's actually reinforcing the story of suffering. If what you long for is purpose and you pursue porn, in the end, it will leave you only more bored and only with even less direction and even less motivation to go out there and pursue something meaningful and worthwhile. And we know this. So we're actually reinforcing the pain. We're actually reinforcing the story of suffering when we give the thing to ourselves in a way that's out of alignment with God's design. And then the last desire, the one that is just so inspiring to me, is when we can overflow to others. And this can be so healing, because if all we have is the first three, if I'm getting my desire from God, finding it with others, and giving it to myself, well, in the end, that's still a self-centered, self-contained, self-absorbed picture. What if, redemptively, you can find a way to give that thing to someone else, to offer friendship to someone else, to give someone else that community and belonging, to bring them pleasure, to bring them purpose, help them find their purpose. Wow. When we can do that, we feel the power of a meaningful life, one lived with God, with other people, with our true selves, our true desires, and the need for porn, or the urges and the attractions that have held us back, they begin to dissolve. It's different for each person. I just want you to imagine, with that desire that you named, if you were able to get it from God, find it with other people, give it to yourself, and overflow to others, do you think you could be free? Do you think you could find healing? Do you think you could enjoy your life if you had those four streams of desire flowing? I think so too. And at times the streams dry up. You might feel far from God. You might be in a situation like recently in the last year with coronavirus, where we lose a lot of our community and our connections with other people. Or something might come up that's triggering you from the past. Maybe you discover a story of suffering that you weren't aware of, and it becomes really hard to relate to yourself. Or you lose that outlet where you were overflowing to others, and that's okay. I hope that these four directions give you language for what we can do with our sexual desires, for where we can put them, because they're so much deeper than we thought, and they're so good. They're so good. So with every desire that we have two choices: either dampen it or deepen it. And sexual stimulation of our urges and impulses, it actually dampens the desire. Taking the risk of reaching out to another person, of pursuing God, of healing my inner child, of choosing to step out on some kind of mission, man, that's a risk. It's deepening the desire. And it's only when we deepen them that we can find them actually being satisfied. Maybe not fully in our current existence, but significantly. Enough so to where porn just doesn't appeal to us anymore. And the sexual behavior that has held us back, it becomes more of an afterthought, because you already have what you really wanted all along. I want to close with a quote by C.S. Lewis. He says, "It would seem that our Lord finds our desires not too strong, but too weak. We are half-hearted creatures, fooling about with drink and sex and ambition when infinite joy is offered us. Like an ignorant child who wants to go on making mud pies in a slum because he cannot imagine what is meant by the offer of a holiday at the sea. We are far too easily pleased. Don't dampen your desires, deepen them. Get them from God. Find them with other people. Give them to yourself in a healthy way and overflow to others." There's your answer.
Thank you, Drew. Really appreciate it. Do you want to pick up on some of these questions? I know there was, and someone to say
Yeah.
thank you, and we're all grateful for what you've said. It's so important. Um, and it reminds me a little bit of the of the Seinfeld episode where they said do the opposite. And so having the two columns is really helps to understand what the opposite is, and that we can pursue the opposite, or the opposite reveals. It really helped me to understand, what's in the thing of being pursued. And my own
Yeah.
issue was being abandoned, and the abandoned
Mm,
per child wants to be picked up and noticed and treasured. So thank you for that. um,
right.
Before we turn to
So
other
welcome.
questions, I think there will be some, and please put them in the chat, guys, if you want them. Can you just give a little more on purity culture, because people may not understand that term or what it means?
Yeah. Yes, I can. And before I do, I just want to say, Jay, I love what you just said about wanting to be treasured. Oh, that's so good. And when we do this deeper work, it opens up the possibility for that to happen. You know, to to really get the desire met, not just the urge or the attraction. Because underneath it all, there is a little boy who needs love within me and within you and within all of us. So that's so awesome. Yeah, for purity culture, it's actually getting a lot more attention these days. I'm using it to describe a movement that began in the 1990s in the evangelical church, where they started telling people very strongly and widely to not have sex outside of marriage. And that's a good message. That's a good thing. I think that's biblical and wise. The problem is that they used fear-based tactics to promote that message, and a lot of shaming in order to do it. So for example, people had purity rings that they would wear, uh, and if they had some kind of sexual sin or mistake, or someone did something to them, then they would feel like, oh, I've broken my promise, and now I'm impure, and now I'm dirty, and now I'm a horrible person. And there became so much fear and shame around sexuality, and this posture that I was talking about of attacking it or avoiding it or just ignoring it, because there wasn't this positive teaching of God's design and goodness. And that's one of the beautiful gifts that Julie Slattery has given our community with her book Rethinking Sexuality, is kind of highlighting um, the message that my generation didn't grow up with, that we really needed to hear. The effect of purity culture on me was that my family never talked about sex except to tell me this one thing, to not have it until I was married, assuming that I would get married, which may or may not have been true. The point is, as a result, it became this forbidden, magicalized area of life. And I felt like I was missing out, and like it was this dangerous, forbidden, yet thrilling um, shadow where I would go and be so confused by the pleasure and the pain that it brought. So that's just a little bit of how it has affected me personally, um, and not to say that the idea of purity is bad. It just needs to be redefined, and it needs to be explained, and this needs to become a conversation where we're talking about, okay, what are we pursuing, not just what are we avoiding, because purity culture was all about what not to do and all the bad stuff that the bad people that we don't want to be, rather than, okay, who are we becoming? Where can we put our sexuality? And that's what we're talking about today, is what can we affirm? What can we bless? And who can we become? I see a comment from you saying that what I described on the second page is bringing more and more peace. That's awesome, man. So glad to hear that.
Yeah. Also, just to elaborate slightly, Julie Slattery is here, and the impact for her in getting married, and a lot of people identify this with the purity culture, is that she was told if her behavior led her to deny sex before marriage, that once she got into marriage, that would automatically mean that she and her husband would have, quote, great sex in marriage. So this is the sort of it's really a salvation by works in a sense. It's, if I don't do all these things, then that will allow me to do things. And we all know that performance basically has zero to do with salvation and the blessing of God. God gives gifts, and the gift he gives is a gift to unwrap and explore fully within marriage. But there's no guarantees that anybody who's a Christian is going to go into marriage and immediately understand something which it's an artist's creation created over many years between a man and a woman in marriage. And the idea that the uninitiated is going to immediately enter into that, that dream has been dashed by 1,000 honeymoons, including my own, when the reality did not match the hope and expectation.
Yes. Yeah. I really resonate with that too. And I love what you said about rather than a performance mindset, really kind of embracing our sexuality and our relationships as a gift. That's really what I'm talking about today. Because as long as we don't have the information that I just shared about what to do with our desires, then our sexuality will feel like a curse. It will feel like I have all of this stuff within me and I have nowhere to put it. I have nowhere to go. I have no idea what to do with it.
Can you, go ahead.
And so rather than having a way to embrace it and express it in a healthy way, we'll feel trapped by our sexuality, and it won't feel like a blessing until we can understand what those deeper desires are and where we can put them.
So I'd maybe like you to elaborate on Hugh's statement, because I think it's a good one. He said, my desires have others experienced this freedom and divine desires. I'm assuming he's saying there. So this is a blessing that many of us have had in recovery, of telling our stories. The stories they're not perfect stories, but they're stories where we are allowing a deeper spirituality and a deeper connection with ourselves, with our wives, and with God, all experienced in sexual sobriety and recovery. But maybe you can elaborate somewhat on that whole, the blessing that becomes. For those of us in recovery, a lot of that is the step 12 work, where we're sharing our stories with others and investing our lives in others who are seeking to either get into recovery or to deepen their recovery.
Yeah, it sounds like you're talking about the direction of overflowing what I desire to other people. Maybe it would be good to clarify something about that. Sometimes what looks like overflowing or giving it to somebody else is really kind of a backhanded way of giving it to myself. If I can help someone else succeed, then I will be successful. If I can give someone else that feeling of acceptance, well, then I'll be acceptable. That is still not fully the picture of health that I'm talking about. It's still covertly just trying to get my need met. So that's why I say overflowing to others, not just giving it to others, because overflow implies that I already have the thing that I'm offering. So I don't need the other person to respond to it or to be helped in any way. I'm doing it because I'm so full and I want to share it. You know, and we can't give somebody what we don't have, and we can only take others as far as we ourselves have gone. And that's why I love how this ministry has helped me just to go deeper in my own story and my own healing, and then out of that, it enriches the ability to be present to others without that performance that you were talking about, right?
So we're getting down to the end here. Maybe you can take a few minutes, Drew, and just tell us a little bit about your ministry and how people can get in touch with you and the various things that you offer.
Yeah, totally. My ministry is called Husband Material. You don't have to be unmarried or married to be a part of it. It's just for Christian men who want to become sexually healthy and mature, and emotionally and spiritually mature, and to outgrow pornography. So we've got a weekly podcast. We've got a really awesome new community app. So you can go to husbandmaterial.app and join our private community away from social media, which has been really wonderful. We have a Facebook group, but that's very triggering with all the distractions, and there's increasing kind of concerns about Facebook. So this community app has been a really wonderful place for all of us to find our healthy desires met with other people around the world. So I really love the podcast, the community. That's all free. And in terms of working with people, my program is called Husband Material Academy, and we do coaching sessions on Zoom every week with guys like this, and we go deep into our stories of suffering and our divine desires, you know, even in the specific sexual fantasies and triggers that we're dealing with. So it's really, really awesome to have this technology that allows us to meet wherever we are.
And you can go to Jim has shared with us, Jim Anderson has shared with us that he discovered Drew separately and was so glad to have him to see that he was going to be our speaker today. But husbandmaterial.com for those of you who want to go directly to the website and also the app as well. So Drew, we give you great thanks for joining us for these wonderful insights and tools that you've given us today. We appreciate it so much. I'm going to be in touch with all you
Jay,
guys.
for people who are watching the recording, how should we get that worksheet to them?
If you send the link, I will send it out with the recording. So
Perfect.
any additional material, just send it to me. I'll include it in the link with the recording, and they can access it all.
Sounds great.
Okay. So I will be in touch with you this coming week on our next steps with the spring seminar series. We'll keep it a surprise for now, but thanks for joining us. We hope you have a wonderful weekend. Again, if you have any questions or concerns or want to contact me, you can contact me at jay@livingwithoutlust.com. So have a great weekend, everybody. Drew, thank you, and God bless to all.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.